headphones on, and you're looking through the TV cameras. There's wires everywhere, and it's not what you see when you're a kid sitting on the sofa watching the TV show. But something really sort of shone out, or was quite visceral, if you like, from that experience, and that was the fact that he was very cold and remote, and there was some real oddness about him, and that started the journey. It wasn't like I went off and started obsessing about Jimmy Savile straight away, but that was definitely the seed.
I think back then, though, when people were famous, they were famous, and it doesn't matter who you are, even though you'd have probably felt that kind of weird energy, the coldness, like you say, because they're famous, we put these people on pedestals where you kind of bypass everything that you're feeling and kind of just see them as, I wouldn't say gods, but idols, no matter who it is, or their backstory, even though a lot of people didn't know his backstory then, but I believe obviously the 50s he was kind of getting exposed. But yeah, a weird character, but again, Netflix documentaries, more books, he will always be spoke about, I believe, because there'll never ever be any answers to it now. So it's a lot of it's speculation, a lot of it is hearsay, and a lot of it is people's opinions, but it's just so much dirt against the guy. And like I say, we'll get into all that, how he managed to work his way around it all without ever getting convicted. But before we get into everything, though, Dan, I always like to go back to the start with my guests, get more of a bit of an understanding about you, where you grew up and how it all began.
Well, I grew up in London, one of 4 kids, had quite young parents, went to school in London, wanted to be a sort of sportsman, I think, was never quite good enough, but loved sport, and my first job in journalism was writing about sport.
What sport?
Golf, to start with. I love golf, and I wrote to a load of sports magazines when I left school, football, golf, all the sort of sports I loved, really, and was lucky enough that somebody gave me a chance, and that was the start of my journalism career. And then I did that for a year before going to university at Liverpool, and then did football fanzines and freelance for people during university, and then went back to the golf magazine during my sort of holidays from universities rather. And that was it. And then worked on football magazines during the 90s, and then in sort of men's magazines during the 2000s, and was sort of in and around that sort of Loaded era when I was on the football magazine. So Loaded was all starting up at IPC magazines in London. So it was an exciting time. And then sort of moved into newspapers and, away from sport and more into interviewing people and writing sort of longer form features. So that was it, really.
Trying sports changed now, or are we just getting older? Back in the day, it just seemed more glorious. There was something about it. I always talk about the Premiership back in the day, and it was like your Patrick Vieira's, your Roy Keane's, your Eric Cantona's. That's just how I remember football. It was dirty, it was tough. It just seems now when you look at sports stars, I don't know if, like I say, because I'm getting older and I've interviewed a lot of people, it doesn't have the same kind of feel to it. But back then, even when you're watching the golf and the Grand Prix, Italian football, there was just something magical about your weekends.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was the next best thing to playing top level sport, was writing about it. And I was very fortunate that, covered World Cups and interviewed loads of great footballers and golfers and sports stars, and worked in Australia for a year on a sports magazine, and, interviewed rugby players and Aussie rules players and all that sort of stuff. And, just had a lot of amazing experiences, was very sort of experience rich, but cash poor. And I wouldn't necessarily swap any of those experiences. But yeah, I mean, I think football was different, wasn't it? And I found a load of copies of the magazine I used to work for, Goal Magazine, online recently, and bought a load of copies. And I've forgotten that I used to ghostwrite Gareth Southgate's column for Goal Magazine. So yeah, I mean, and just some of the stuff we did, going up to the Old Firm Derby, or going away with England to places like Moldova and Albania and, Rome, and following my team, Liverpool, all over Europe and all over Britain. So yeah, I had a lot of good times with sport, and then, a lot of good times on men's magazines as well, which was where, in 2004, the first sort of interview with Savile happened. So yeah, I mean, the always loved to write, been very fortunate in my career. I've been, one to be given the opportunity by people in the first place as a sort of raw 19-year-old, and then just fell in love with it. And it's just been, sort of my passion ever since, and something that you get better at as you get older, I think. And I think that the book is still the best thing I've ever done. I'm very proud of it, even if the subject matter is is painful, not least for the people who sort of, the abuse they've faced is covered in the book. But yeah, it was something that was exciting to write, if you like, because I knew it was good when I was writing it, not because, it sounds almost wrong but I knew what I was writing was really good and it was really coming together, and it took me a very long time. It was almost like one of those magic eye pictures, you look at and you have to make your eyes relax to see the picture come through. And that was almost a process of sort of seeing my way through this story. And I had to sort of step away from it at times because it became very frustrating, because he was like, I described him as it was trying to get to the real Jimmy Savile was like trying to nail smoke to the wall. He was a very elusive, very slippery, very evasive character.
Yeah, like you say with the book, this book will be studied for many, many years, I believe, because you're the last one basically to then cover stories on him. So it's understandable how you're proud of it, and people might think, oh yeah, it's weird, it's Jimmy Savile, but I understand that it's your creative mindset of interviews and this, and with his kind of status, it's understandable, but it is a dark book as well, where it takes you on twists and turns, trying to understand basically the devil, and you've went first hand and try to do that. So you've got to kind of commend that with, it's a fucking brave thing to do as well, because you must be thinking, what's people going to say? Stepping away from it, coming back, should I do it, should I not do it? Was there ever any hesitation, or did you just believe, okay, this is my chance, I need to do it?
Well, it wasn't really about a chance. I think it was about the instinct that, like, here was a guy who was one of the most famous, instantly recognizable people in Britain, and nobody knew who he was. And that I just thought was so interesting in itself. And, everything that he did, the way he dressed, the way he had his hair, the way he acted, he was like, I've always described him as this sort of heat-seeking missile for publicity. He craved publicity. He craved attention, that sort of narcissism that we were talking about earlier. Yet nobody knew who he was. He was completely shut off. He completely, the way I describe it in the book is he sort of bricked himself inside this facade, and the facade was the tracksuits, the jewelry,